heard she was asking like in excess of $200,000 for it. And there's no way that restaurant could service that debt.
A little pricey for there, you know. Now, okay. We're working on tape 12. You can see all these that I've done so far. Probably a lot of guys in here, you know. All right, what's your name?
David? Middle initial M,
What's that stand for?
Michael, Michael. Ware, W-E-A-R.
Dave, when were you born?
5/30/47.
And today's date is 5/25/2000.
25.
All right, great.
You taking this on just as your own personal
Yes?
endeavor or endeavor? Or?
Yeah, I've had some help, some of the veterans organizations, they bought my tapes, for example. This camera is from Shawnee State down here.
Mhm.
The Portsmouth Library are cataloging, shelving the tapes and everything. So we've got 11 tapes on there so far. And keep this with your stuff. This says that you were videotaped this date, and that the tape is on, and that the video is on number 12. And this will be kept at the Portsmouth Public Library in 100 years from now. Your greats can go down and watch you.
Okay.
All right. So let me ask you a few questions here. Dave, I got a little prompting words here. Dave, your name and date of birth. Where were you born?
Here in Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, Ohio. What is your present address?
129 Raymond Avenue, West Portsmouth, Ohio.
Okay. And what is your occupation?
I'm Vice President for First Star Bank, Portsmouth, Ohio.
And in fact, this interview is happening in your office now at First Star, isn't it?
That's correct.
Okay. And what is the address of this building?
We're located at 602 Chillicothe Street,
Okay.
Portsmouth.
How much education have you had?
14 years. Actually, a little better than that. But
Okay. Are you married?
married with 2 children.
Okay. I always try to create what I call a genealogical line, because I know that people are going to be watching this, say 100 years from now. Might be people that are trying to trace their, family lineage and that sort of thing. So tell me your parents' names.
My father was David C., David Conrad Ware. Mother was Ruth D. Ware.
What was her maiden name?
Maiden name was Hobbs, H-O-B-B-S.
Okay. Now, what were her parents' names?
Her father's name, and I've never met them. My mother's mother died when she was 2, and Grandpa died when she was maybe 20, 21, long before. I never met any. I only knew one grandparent, and that was my father's mother.
Okay.
And but mom's mother's name, I think, was Minnie, and that's sheer memory from way back in here.
Down in folklore.
And the only thing I ever heard her dad referred to was Pop.
Okay.
That's the only thing.
Minnie
I
and
ever heard.
Pop, then, okay.
Yeah.
Well, if
That's not a whole lot of help, but
I don't know if that turns up on the birth certificates.
that's
We'll know what it is.
about the only thing I remember out of that.
Okay. Now, what were your father's parents' names?
My grandfather on Dad's side was named Scott, David Scott Ware, and my grandmother, isn't that awful? I cannot remember her first name.
It'll pop up here.
But again, this, and she's the only one I knew, so to speak, but she died when I was just a teenager, and she had been an invalid for several years.
I see.
And really wasn't, the kids, my generation kids of the family weren't really around her that much.
You remember your grandfather? Do you know your grandfather's parents' names?
No, John, I have that at home on
Okay.
genealogy, but
Very good.
I don't remember it offhand, but it's not a genealogy that I did. My cousin, Tom Ware, and his wife
Okay,
did this down in Warner Robins Air Force Base, Georgia,
great.
and sent me a copy of it 2 or 3 years ago, and I've
Great.
read it a couple of times, or read through it, not read it from, it's only, I think, 680 pages long,
Is
so.
that all? You memorized
There was only 16, my dad only had 16 brothers and sisters that
Oh,
lived,
that
and
lived?
there was, I think,
Gracious.
3 or 4 stillborn, so.
Oh, my goodness. Where was he from?
Here in Portsmouth.
Okay. Where was your mother from?
Mom was originally from West Virginia,
All right.
in the Huntington area,
Okay.
but they were living here in Portsmouth when she and Dad met.
What is your wife's name?
Kathy with a C,
Okay.
middle name Lynn,
What was her maiden name?
and her maiden name was McCall, MCCALL.
Do you know her parents' names?
Her parents is Margaret Vivian McCall. Her maiden name was Cox, C-O-X. And then Kathy's dad was Theodore Allen McCall.
Okay. Where are they from?
They are both Scioto County residents, born and raised in Scioto County.
Okay. Now, do you have any children? You said you didn't
Have 2 children. Have a daughter, Wendy Michelle. She's now married to a gentleman by the name of Anthony Retke, R-E-T-T-K-E,
Mhm.
and they live in Reynoldsburg, Ohio.
Mhm. And now, on them, do they have children?
No, they do not.
Now you
No,
have.
they've just been married a little over a year and a half. And
Nice.
no little ones yet.
Are you
I'd love to have
grandpa?
them. No.
Not yet?
Wish I was. I'd love to be. I love kids.
Oh, yeah. And I see you had some other children.
I have a son, Brian David,
Mhm.
who is currently serving in the United States Air Force in Charleston, South Carolina.
Mhm. Okay, so you had 2 children then?
Mhm.
Okay. Now let me ask you about this. We're talking about your military. Did you enlist? Were you drafted? How did you get?
I enlisted,
Okay. Did you enlist in the Army, Navy, Air Force?
United States Air Force.
Okay. And when did you enlist?
I was inducted October 2nd, 1965.
Okay. And when were you discharged?
I was discharged February 7th, 1969.
Okay. And what was your rank when you were discharged?
Well, the rank at that time was Airman First Class. My staff sergeant orders were in, but I had to re-enlist to get them. It was at the closeout of the Vietnam War area, and they were cutting troops back, and I either had to take an early out and re-enlist or take an early out and get out, and I chose take an early out and get out.
Where was your basic training?
Lackland Air Force Base, San Antonio, Texas.
Okay. And what were you assigned? I mean, what was your MOS, your military occupational specialist?
I don't remember the number. I'll think if I think about it, I can. But I was with Detachment 6, 1st Combat Evaluation Group, and we did high altitude training for, at that time, B-52s, B-58s, F-4Cs and F-100s for high altitude bomb drops over Vietnam.
What did you do? Is there anything you can tell me about that? I mean,
Well, it's all declassified now, but we were set up on radar and with a computer where we could direct if anyone was in Vietnam and recognized the name ArcLight, we were the ones behind the ArcLight missions in Vietnam. We brought the B-52s in, they'd normally fly in 9 aircraft, 3 aircraft in each sortie, and then 3 sorties back to back, and we would do their bomb drops, or we were the ones that directed them what altitude to fly at, what direction. I mean, we were given the exact location of the target to hit. We'd enter that information into our computer, and then the computer would diagram out then what direction we brought the aircraft in. We'd have to log in the ordnance that was on the aircraft, and then that would determine the, coupled with what winds were there and several other variables, it would determine the altitude and airspeed that the aircraft, altitude, airspeed, and direction the aircraft needed to be flying at the time they released their ordnance to properly hit the site. And I think at the time it was told to us prior to the time we went to Vietnam, the average miss distance of the arc light mission was like 8,200 feet. And once we went to Vietnam, once we started training the B-52s, we could drop the first bomb within 50 feet of our target from 30,000 feet. So
Did you have to be over target then, or how did?
we could set here in Portsmouth and direct B-52 sortie at Columbus or Dayton or Cincinnati.
Where were you actually then, offshore?
I was at
Guam?
Pleiku.
You were at
I was in
Pleiku?
Pleiku, Central Highlands.
Okay, and that's where you could direct the B-52s to their target.
We could cover the biggest part of the northern part of South Vietnam and part of the southern part of North Vietnam, all the DMZ, and over into part of Laos and Cambodia.
Did you ever target Hanoi?
No, we were not that close to Hanoi to target.
You would target like the Central Highland area?
Central Highland area, Montyards gave us a lot of information where troop movement was and down the Ho Chi Minh Trail.
You would target the Ho Chi Minh Trail?
Yeah.
Okay, interesting.
Some in the pepper basket.
Okay. Where did you do your AIT, Advanced Individual Training, after Lackland?
That was at Keesler Air Force Base, Mississippi. That was electronics training. I spent 13 months at Keesler.
Oh. How long were you in the Air Force altogether?
A little over 3 years, 3 months. It was like 3 years, 3 months, and 17 days, something like that.
So you did go overseas to Vietnam, and you were on the ground as an Air Force person.
That's
at Pleiku.
correct.
Did you go to were you assigned to any other bases there?
No, we were what was classified as short-timer when we went to Vietnam. We were out of Detachment 6. We were actually part of Strategic Air Command, and the instruction for Strategic Air Command at the time was that we were supposed to be defending the continental United States.
Mm-hmm.
The only way we could go overseas was on temporary duty and volunteer.
Okay.
Military volunteer, you, and you. But when we went over, it was for a maximum 181 days at a time. So when we got to Vietnam, we only had 181 days before we came back to the United States. We were classified as a short timer when we got there.
Did in fact you stay 181 days?
Yes.
And then you came back?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you go back to Vietnam any?
Volunteered to go back, but at that time was winding down and didn't need anyone to go back.
Okay.
I'm sure they needed troops, but didn't need any in my MOS.
Were you ever in a combat situation?
Uh,
Getting mortared maybe, or by the?
Almost nightly at Pleiku. We were there, we landed or ended up in Pleiku about 4 months before the Tet Offensive of the 68th. We were there, and we were there during the Tet Offensive. And of course, Pleiku at the time, if memory serves me correctly, there was about 30,000 Army troops at Pleiku, and our radar site was at the highest point in Pleiku, where we had the widest amount of coverage, obviously, that way. It was difficult for the Vietnamese to get into us because they had to go through so many Army troops, but during the Tet Offensive, the first and second day of the Tet Offensive, they were close enough that we could see them, a lot closer than we wanted them to be, but like I say, there were still several Army troops between us and them, but they were no further away, probably from here to the U.S. Grant Bridge, which is 6 blocks away.
So you had visual contact?
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
How long did that last? That lasted about a week or so.
Tet was about 11 days, week 11 days by the time, I think it was almost 11 days by the time they got Pleiku City back.
Okay. It sort of fizzled away.
Yeah,
then.
right. The big push was the first and second day, and primarily the first day, and then it just kind of went gradually downhill from there. But it was just they caught everyone off guard at the time.
Were you ever wounded?
No.
Do you have decorations or ribbons, I guess, of overseas, National Defense Ribbon and so forth?
The typical for serving in Vietnam, and no special awards or anything.
What was the worst thing that ever happened to you in the service? Then I'm gonna ask you the best thing.
I, probably losing a couple buddies in Vietnam would obviously be the worst, and that was more just a personal loss, I guess, than saying it was the military. Probably, I'd have to say the worst feeling as a result of the military was coming back.
Did you like the military?
Loved it.
You didn't
Yeah.
re-enlist?
I would have stayed in and had intentions of staying in, and
Met the woman of your dreams?
no, I got out when I was
Not yet.
single. I actually, I was in Cleveland, Ohio. I was stationed in Bayshore, Michigan, and our site there was probably a half, 3/4 acre of ground. And we had several different radars and the computer systems set up there, and we do training over the northern peninsula, over into Wisconsin and south. We were still training the B-52s, B-58s, and F-4Cs and F-100s. Got into some other aircraft, but I came into a temporary duty in the Cleveland area, training what was referred to as distance early warning, and it was the Nike troops. Loved the program, enjoyed doing the work, enjoyed working with the people up there. I was there again, supposed to be for 6 months, and it was choice duty. Okay, I came in one morning, Monday morning. You'd call Westover Air Force Base to get your orders for that week. In other words, what aircraft were coming in that you had to train the Nike troops on. And the only thing that we would do with them is say if I had a flight of B-52s coming in Wednesday afternoon in a window from 1 to 3, then I'd notify the Nike people to be in, say, at 10 o'clock Wednesday morning, and they'd be there from 10 to 6. Well, they had to set at their radar and then tell me when the planes were coming from. They had to identify them, what altitude, what airspeed, where they were coming from, and how quickly they could do it. And then we would grade them on their ability to do that.
The Nike, you're talking about the anti-air defense missile? Yes, that was a Nike.
Right. And when I went in one Monday morning, February 6th or 7th, 1969, or in that area, and I went in to call Westover Air Force Base to get my orders, and there's a guy from my outfit there. What are you doing here? And he said, well, I got orders for you. The old man wants you back on base. And I said, for what? And he says, I don't know. He just wants you back. And I said, well, I've not done anything wrong. But, what's going on?
What have I done wrong?
Yeah. So at any rate, you in the military, you do what they tell you to do. So I got my orders, and I drove back up to Bayshore that afternoon to see the old man. And when I went, very informal, and I don't mean old man as a disrespectful term,
Sure,
but it was a very informal outfit that we were in. And when I went in to see him, went back into his office, and his question was to me, well, number one, he showed me my orders where I was being promoted to staff sergeant, and asked me if I was going to get out of the military or re-enlist. And I said, well, probably re-enlist, but we're talking about October, and I don't know yet. This is February. I don't have to make that decision until October. He said, well, if you had to decide right now, what would you do? And I said, well, I don't know. I've not given it any thought. And we bantered back and forth for a few minutes, and then finally, he kept insisting that I give him an answer. And I said, well, why do you have to have an answer today? And he said, because you're scheduled for discharge tomorrow.
Oh.
So he said, you'll either take an early out and re-enlist tomorrow, or you're taking early out and be out. And I said, well, if I re-enlist tomorrow, can I go back to Cleveland? And he said, well, I can't guarantee you that. He said, I'll try to get you back there eventually, but I can't tell you when you'll go back, or if you'll go back. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, 250 million Americans can't be wrong, process me. And that was probably.
Was he angry with you about it?
No, not really. I mean, I think, we got along well, and I think that he really probably would have liked for me to stay in,
Right.
and looking back, it's probably something I should have done, but, who knows?
Who knows,
You know,
right.
I could have stayed in, and I could be one of the names on the wall up here at Tracy Park right now,
Yeah.
so, I don't like to look back and say I wish I'd have done something differently, but, everything worked out fine. I came back, met my wife, and I've got 2 lovely children, and we've been married 30-plus years now, and had I not gotten out, I might, you know, none of that might have happened.
Have you
So-
kept in contact with any of the people you served with?
No, not really. It was a close-knit group, but it wasn't a close-knit group in that respect. There was 112 or 114 people on our site, but we were TDY all the time. And for instance, there was 6 of us that rented a house together, 4-bedroom home, because there was no barracks or anything there where we were at. But at any given time, there was probably no more than 1 or 2 of us at the house at any given time. We had several training sites throughout the United States that we would travel to for 3 months or 6 months at a time. And you know, I could give you, for instance, when I came back from Vietnam, I bought a new car. I had 2 or 3 weeks vacation, and to make a long story short, about 5 days into the leave, wasn't vacation, a guy pulled out in front of me and totaled the car. Not my fault, but his insurance company wouldn't pay to buy me a new, or to rent me a new car. Didn't total it, might as well have, but they would not pay to lease me a car or to furnish me a car while my car was being prepared. When I called my commander back at site, told him what was going on, he said, "Oh yeah, they will." He said, "All I gotta do is cancel your leave. If you wanna come back to work, we'll bring you back to work, and they've gotta furnish you a vehicle." And I said, "That's fine. Can I get my leave then when my vehicle's done?" And he said, "Yep, no problem." So he cancels my leave. The insurance company furnished me a car, and I drove it back to the base. Well, when I got the car, I called the commander again, told him I got the car and was heading back, and I asked him if he had any TDY, and he told me he did, and I said, "Well, you want to get me a crew together, and I'll take it when I get up there." So we'll get up and get the orders. So when I went back to Bayshore, I immediately picked up orders for Bobo, Mississippi, and picked up my 3 crew members. We took off for Bobo, Mississippi to service a train that we had radar and computer systems set up on the train, and we'd set them stationary alongside an area, say that was the terrain of Moscow or whatever, and then we'd bring the B-52s and the B-58s and everything in and fly them at low altitude, high altitude, medium altitude, whatever, to train them for approaches to, in case we did have to go into Moscow or whatever, or pick a city, you know. But in a 30-day period, we went from Bayshore, Michigan to Bobo, Mississippi, to Ainsworth, Nebraska, to Thrall, Texas, and back to Ainsworth, Nebraska, and back to Bobo, and back to Bayshore, Michigan. And that was in a 30-day period, just servicing, you know, going in and doing repair work and preventive maintenance on the computer and radar systems.
You mentioned a B-58. Is that the Delta swept wing? I can't picture that one in my mind.
Yeah, the B-58, it's not, actually the swept wing is the F-4C, more so. The B-58 is the high altitude bomber that supposedly can go, I mean, it's somewhat of a swept wing. But it's, I believe B-58 was like Mach 2 or Mach 2.5, something like that. Had a much longer range than what the B-52 is, couldn't carry near the ordnance. But there were no B-58s in Vietnam. They weren't allowed to go in. Those were new aircraft at the time, or relatively new aircraft at the time, and they actually kept those stateside to pretty well protect the United States, not against Vietnam, but anyone else. The B-52 could carry so much more ordnance and probably scared the Vietnamese more than anything. It was the initial bomb hitting from a B-52, because they knew that that then there was, once that first one hit, there was several hundred going to hit within 20, 25 baseball field widths, and you couldn't run fast enough to get out of it. And typically what they would find is the survivors of those would head for the first bomb crater. And wherever the first bomb hit, they'd try to hide in it, in the crater for it to survive through. But it was, if you remember about 20 years ago, or what, I think that's about the time when Mount St. Helena, or St. Helens, St. Helena, when that volcano erupted, and you saw pictures of it, how the woods would be, how all the trees were just broken down, looked like matchsticks that someone dropped. That's about what an arc light looked like if it hit a wooded area.
Did you see that personally?
Yes.
Were you able to go out on ground?
Yeah. Well, we had a lot. Montyard's reported some Vietnamese, North Vietnamese. This was probably a month or so before the Tet Offensive, a big buildup on a range of mountains that you could see from Pleiku and see from our site. And we brought several B-52 arc lights in on that mountain range, and it just, I mean, it destroys it. Of course, over there, you've got such vegetation growth that a month or 6 weeks from now, it doesn't even look like anything happened other than you don't have tall trees. But it at the time pretty well totally destroyed anything that was there when it hit.
Whole units would disappear, I understood. Just regiments would just be blown away. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to, do you have any tattoos you'd like to talk about or anything like
No
that?
tattoos. I don't like needles. I don't to this day like tattoos.
Or anything like that? Have you been over to Washington, seen the wall?
Yes, I have. Probably when my kids were, I think they were 13 and 15 or 12 and 14 in that area. My wife and I took them over, and we spent, I think we spent 7 to 10 days, or I think we were 10 days, but that was probably one of the more touching moments that I can't hardly talk about it today.
I know it's moving. When I saw it, I was very moved.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my son has acquired several pictures for me that adorn our living room at home of the Vietnam Memorial with also the mother and daughter and the parents and the I can't think of the other ones there, but there's several different series of pictures that I have on the wall, and it's I lost 2 good buddies over there, and you know, of course, there was a lot of good people lost over there, but not sure what for today.
Yeah, it's perplexing. Do you think the Vietnam veteran now is getting the recognition that, like you say, when you come home, a lot of them come home, it wasn't very nice?
I don't, John, I don't really think that they do still today. I know we flew into, I think we came into Olympia, Washington when we came back, and it was, we could have probably been dropped off in a foreign country and treated better than we were when we landed in Olympia, Washington. It was.
Did they have protesters there? Or?
No, it was. I mean, it was just a general opinion of the people there. It was like, you know, of course you know you heard the baby killers and all this. It was really disheartening, and you wondered. You know, we were only gone 6 months. I can't imagine the guys that were over there a year or 18 months or whatever to come back and see the change, because from the time we went over to the time we got back, it was just an altogether different feeling and different treatment that the people gave you. We couldn't even use, they wouldn't even take a check from us in Washington to buy tickets to come home. I had to have money wired to me in Washington, in Olympia, Washington. I had my dad wire me money through Western Union, where I could use that money to buy a ticket to come home on. And it was, you know, at the time I probably had, I don't know, $4,000 or $5,000 in a checking account, which was a lot of money in 1968. but, you know, you were a veteran, you know, why should we trust you?
Is there anything else you'd like to say to the folks watching us 200 years from now?
Boy. You know, I don't mean this trying to, I mean this for the other veterans. Let's treat them right.
Thanks very much, Dave. Appreciate it, buddy. Okay. Now, that might have finished this tape.